10 minutes before my daughter's wedding, I heard her fiancé laughing with his friends. What he said next made my hands shake and my heart stop. 23 years I spent building a life for my daughter Sarah. 23 years of sacrifice, of working double shifts at the diner, of skipping meals so she could have everything she needed. And there I was, standing in that hotel hallway in Charleston, 10 minutes before her wedding, when I heard her fiancé Marcus laughing with his groomsmen. What came next made my blood run cold in a way I'd never felt before. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. We love knowing how far these stories reach. That Saturday morning in June started like any bride's dream. The Grand Oak Hotel was decorated with white roses and golden ribbons, exactly what Sarah had always wanted. I'd saved every penny from my tips at Rosie's Diner for 3 years to give her this perfect day. My dress was pressed, my makeup done, and the photographer was already capturing every moment downstairs. Sarah looked absolutely radiant in her fitting room, her auburn hair pinned up with tiny pearls, her smile brighter than I'd seen in years. Marcus came from old Charleston money, the kind of family that summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. His family's construction company had hit some rough patches recently, something about bad investments and canceled contracts. I noticed how Marcus started paying more attention to Sarah right around the time my little catering business took off. 3 years ago, we went from my kitchen to supplying desserts for half the events in Charleston County. It seemed like perfect timing back then, but now I wonder if it was just perfect planning on his part. "Mom, can you grab my bouquet from the groom's suite?" Sarah asked while her makeup artist added the final touches. I left it there when I dropped off his gift earlier. I nodded and headed down the corridor, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The venue was stunning, everything Sarah deserved after watching me struggle her entire childhood. Her father walked out when she was 2. Never looked back, never sent a dime. The door to the groom's suite was slightly open, and I could hear male voices laughing inside. I was about to knock when I heard Marcus speaking, his voice dripping with contempt. "Just a few more hours, boys. Then I sign those partnership papers and get my hands on that catering goldmine." His words hit me like a physical blow. But what came next was even worse. Marrying that pathetic cow is a small price to pay for what I'm getting. My hand froze inches from the door, every muscle in my body turning to ice. "But you're gonna have to sleep with her, man." That was Jake, Marcus's best friend, his voice full of mockery. Marcus laughed, a sound that made my stomach turn. "Nothing a few shots of whiskey won't fix. She's so desperate for attention, she believes every word I say." The other groomsmen erupted in laughter, and I had to press my hand against the wall to keep from collapsing. 23 years of protecting my daughter, and here she was, about to marry a monster who saw her as nothing more than a meal ticket. And her mom, that stupid old waitress working her fingers to the bone at that catering business. Marcus continued, his voice full of venom. "She has no idea that in 6 months we sell everything and she goes back to serving coffee at that trashy diner where she belongs." My vision blurred with tears, but I forced myself to keep listening. I needed to hear it all, every disgusting word, because Sarah would need proof. My baby girl was about to walk down that aisle to a man who was planning to destroy everything we built together. "When she starts crying about something, she looks like a beached whale," Marcus said, and the room exploded with laughter again. I'd heard enough. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pull out my phone, but I managed to start recording. I stood there for another 2 minutes, capturing every cruel word, every calculated plan, every heartless laugh. The man Sarah loved, the man she thought was her Prince Charming, was nothing but a con artist in an expensive suit. I walked away from that door on legs that barely held me up. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to tell Sarah without destroying her completely. Would she even believe me? Or would she think I was trying to sabotage her happiness? I'd always been protective, maybe too protective, and Marcus had used that against me, painting me as the overbearing mother who couldn't let go. But this wasn't about control. This was about saving my daughter from a nightmare disguised as a fairy tale. I made it back to Sarah's suite without the bouquet, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, noticing my pale face immediately. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile, buying myself time to think. "The suite was locked, honey. I'll get the key from the front desk." I lied, hating myself for it, but I needed a plan before I dropped this bomb on her perfect day. I stepped into the hallway and immediately called Robert, my accountant and closest friend for the past decade. My voice was shaking as I spoke. "Robert, I need you at the Grand Oak Hotel right now. Bring those emergency contingency documents we prepared last year." He could hear the panic in my voice and didn't ask questions. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Nicole," he said, using my name to ground me. "That's what real friends do. They show up when your world is falling apart." Next, I called my lawyer, Patricia Chen, who I'd worked with when setting up the catering business. "Patricia, I need immediate legal protection for my business assets. No, I can't explain right now, but I need it done before noon." She must have heard something in my voice because she agreed without hesitation. "I'm pulling up the files now, Nicole. We can execute the emergency trust protocol." I'd set up these protections years ago, never imagining I'd actually need them, especially not on my daughter's wedding day. I stood in that empty hallway, my back against the cold wall, and let myself feel everything for just 60 seconds. The betrayal, the rage, the heartbreak for my Sarah, who had no idea what was waiting for her. She'd been so happy these past 8 months, planning every detail, talking about the future, about babies and growing old together. Marcus had played his part perfectly. The devoted fiancé, the supportive partner, the man who finally appreciated everything special about my daughter. But I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. I had 2 impossible choices staring me down. I could tell Sarah the truth right now and watch her dream wedding explode into a nightmare. Or I could let her walk down that aisle and marry a man who was planning to use her and discard her like garbage. As a mother, which pain do you choose for your child? The quick, brutal truth, or the slow, devastating betrayal that would come later? Either way, I was about to break my daughter's heart. Robert arrived in 15 minutes, his tie crooked and his briefcase under his arm. We met in a small conference room the hotel let us use. "Nicole, what's going on?" he asked, genuine concern in his eyes. I played him the recording, watching his face go from confusion to shock to pure rage. "That son of a—" He stopped himself, his hands clenched into fists. "What do you need me to do?" That's when I knew we were going to war, and we were going to win. "We implement the contingency plan right now, not tomorrow, not after the wedding, right now," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The contingency plan was something we'd created when the catering business started expanding rapidly. It was designed to protect everything Sarah and I had built in case something happened to me. I never thought I'd be using it to protect us from her own husband. Robert opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, his fingers flying across his laptop as he connected to our secure systems. "Nicole, you understand what this means?" Robert asked, looking up at me with serious eyes. "Once we do this, Marcus will have zero access to the business. But it also means Sarah won't be able to touch the capital until the terms you set are met." I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. My daughter would be furious when she found out, but her anger was better than her ruin. "Do it, Robert. Transfer everything to the holding company we set up. Make me the sole decision maker and add you and my sister Linda as co-administrators." For the next 90 minutes, we worked frantically. Robert called the notary, who happened to be playing golf nearby, and agreed to come for an emergency signing. We video conferenced with Linda in Atlanta, who gave her digital power of attorney without asking why. By 11:30, Sweet Dreams Catering no longer belonged to me personally. It belonged to a holding company that required 3 signatures for any major decision. Sarah would still receive her salary and bonuses, but she couldn't sell it, couldn't use it as loan collateral, and most importantly, her future husband would have absolutely no legal claim to any of it. "It's done," Robert said, closing his laptop with a decisive click. "Marcus can marry Sarah, but he'll never touch a single dollar of what you two built." I felt a small wave of relief wash over me, but it was immediately replaced by a much larger wave of dread. Now I had to tell Sarah, and I had to do it before she walked down that aisle. The business was protected, but what about her heart? How do you tell your daughter that the man she loves sees her as nothing more than a fat paycheck? I walked back toward Sarah's suite, my steps slow and heavy. Through the window, I could see guests starting to arrive, taking their seats in the garden where the ceremony would happen. The string quartet was warming up, playing soft classical pieces that drifted through the air. Everything looked perfect, like a scene from a romance movie. But I was about to turn it into a horror film, and there was no other choice. What I didn't know was that Marcus had his own plans, and the next few hours would become a battle I never saw coming. I found Sarah alone in her suite, the makeup artist and bridesmaids having stepped out for lunch. She was standing by the window in her wedding dress, looking like an absolute angel. The sunlight caught the beading on her gown, making her sparkle. When she turned to face me, her smile was so pure, so full of hope and joy that I almost couldn't do it. But then I remembered Marcus's voice calling her a cow, calling me a stupid waitress, and my resolve hardened into steel. "Sarah, sweetheart, we need to talk about something very serious." I said, closing the door behind me. She must have seen something in my face because her smile faded immediately. Mom, what's wrong? Did something happen with the caterers? She thought it was a business problem, something fixable, something small. If only it were that simple. I sat down on the couch and patted the seat next to me. Come sit with me, baby. What I'm about to tell you is going to be very hard to hear. I told her everything. Every word I'd heard Marcus say. Every cruel laugh. Every calculated plan to steal our business and leave us with nothing. As I spoke, I watched my daughter's face transform through a dozen emotions. Disbelief, confusion, denial, and finally, a pain so deep it physically hurt me to witness. No, she whispered, shaking her head. He wouldn't do that. You must have misunderstood, Mom. Marcus loves me. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I saw the first tears forming in her eyes. Honey, I recorded it, I said gently, pulling out my phone. I didn't want to, but I knew you'd need to hear it yourself. Her hand trembled as she took the phone from me. I watched her press play, watched her face crumble as Marcus's voice filled the room. Marrying that pathetic cow is a small price to pay. When the recording ended, Sarah sat frozen, staring at the phone like it was a bomb that had just exploded her entire world. And in a way, it had. He called me a cow, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Then louder, tears streaming down her face, ruining the perfect makeup. He called me a pathetic cow, Mom. And he called you a stupid waitress. She started sobbing, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight while she fell apart. This was the nightmare I'd tried to prevent, but it was better than the alternative. Better she cry now than spend years married to a man who despised her. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry, I whispered, rocking her like I did when she was little and had nightmares. But this nightmare was real, and I couldn't kiss it away or tell her it was just a bad dream. We sat like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. Finally, Sarah pulled away, wiping her eyes with shaking hands. What do I do, Mom? There are 200 people downstairs. The ceremony starts in 40 minutes. How do I face everyone? Before I could answer, someone knocked on the door. Sarah, it's Marcus. Can I come in for a second? His voice was smooth, charming, completely different from the monster I'd heard earlier. Sarah looked at me with wild eyes, and I saw something shift in her expression. The heartbreak was still there, but now there was something else too. Anger. Pure, righteous anger. Let him in, she said, her voice suddenly cold. I want to hear what he has to say to my face. Marcus walked in wearing his tuxedo, looking every bit the handsome groom. His smile faltered when he saw Sarah's tear-stained face and me sitting there like a guard dog. What's wrong, babe? Why are you crying? He asked, concern dripping from every word. If I didn't know better, I'd believe he actually cared. That's how good he was at this, how practiced. How many other women have you done this to? I wondered, watching him perform. I need to ask you something, Marcus, and I need you to be completely honest, Sarah said, standing up to face him. Her voice was shaking, but determined. Are you marrying me because you love me, or because you want to get your hands on my mother's catering business? The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Marcus's face carefully, saw him calculate his response, saw him decide which mask to wear. He chose indignation, offense, hurt feelings, the perfect victim. What kind of question is that? He said, stepping toward her with his hands out. Of course I love you, Sarah. Where is this coming from? He shot me a look full of poison. Did your mother put this in your head? I know she's never liked me, never thought I was good enough for you. It was a good performance, I had to give him that. But we had something he didn't know about. We had proof. My mother heard you talking to your groomsmen, Sarah said, her voice getting stronger with every word. She heard you call me a pathetic cow. She heard you say marrying me was just a small price to pay for getting the catering business. Marcus's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, calculation, and then a forced laugh. And you believed her? He asked, looking between us with fake disbelief. Sarah, your mother has been trying to come between us since day one. She's making this up to stop the wedding. Prove it, he challenged, crossing his arms. It's your word against mine, Nicole. And everyone knows you've always been overprotective, always controlling. That's when I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the room, crystal clear and unmistakable. That pathetic cow, her stupid old waitress mother. In 6 months, we sell everything and she goes back to that trashy diner where she belongs. When she cries, she looks like a beached whale. I stopped the recording and looked at him. watching the color drain from his face. Sarah stood there staring at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. And in a way, she was. The mask had slipped, and the monster underneath was finally visible. "Explain that," she said, her voice like ice. "Explain to me how that was just my mother making things up." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. For the first time since I'd met him, he had nothing smooth or charming to say. He looked like a cornered animal. Those were just stupid jokes. He finally stammered, his confidence crumbling. "The guys were giving me a hard time, and I was drunk. I didn't mean any of it, Sarah. You know I love you." He tried to step closer to her, but she backed away like he was radioactive. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Don't you dare touch me." I stood up and moved to stand next to my daughter, a united front. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together. Marcus looked at me then, and I saw the exact moment he dropped the act completely. His face hardened, the charming smile disappearing into something cold and calculating. "Fine. You want the truth?" he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Yeah, I was going to take that little catering business and turn it into something actually worth something. You two are sitting on a gold mine and running it like a hobby. With my connections, we could have made millions." The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. "Our business?" Sarah's voice rose to a shout. "You were going to steal our business? Everything my mother built from nothing? Everything we worked for?" Marcus rolled his eyes, actually rolled his eyes, like she was being unreasonable. "Steal is such an ugly word. I was going to optimize it. And what does it matter? My family's construction company is tanking. My father lost everything on that hotel development deal. I needed to fix things, and your little bakery was the perfect solution." "Get out," Sarah said, her whole body trembling with rage. "Get out of my room right now." Instead of leaving, Marcus picked up the papers Robert and I had left on the side table. His eyes scanned them quickly, and I watched understanding dawn on his face. "What is this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "A holding company? Transfer of assets?" He looked up at me with pure hatred. "You moved everything." "When did you do this?" "This morning," I said calmly, meeting his glare without flinching. "About 2 hours ago, actually. Sweet Dreams Catering is now completely protected. You'll never see a penny of it, Marcus. Not now, not ever." He crumpled the papers in his fist, his face turning red with rage. "You can't do this. I'll fight it. I have lawyers. Good lawyers. This won't stand up in court." His voice was rising, the polished veneer completely gone now. This was the real Marcus, and he was terrifying. "Actually, it will," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. "I had everything notarized, witnessed, and filed properly. And thanks to that recording, any judge will see exactly why I did it. Try explaining to a court why you deserve access to a business after being caught on tape calling it a gold mine you planned to steal." Marcus stared at me for a long moment, breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. For a second, I thought he might actually hit me. Then he turned back to Sarah and his expression changed again, softening into something that might have been regret if I didn't know better. "Sarah, please, we can work this out. Your mother is poisoning you against me. Everything I said I can explain. We can still get married, still build a life together." He reached for her hand, but she snatched it away. "I want you to leave," she said, her voice breaking. "Leave now, or I'll call security." Marcus stood there for another moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. He was calculating, trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage this, any angle he could still work. When he realized there wasn't, something ugly crossed his face. "You're going to regret this," he said, looking between us. "Both of you. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming." Then he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. The second he was gone, Sarah collapsed. I caught her before she hit the floor, guiding her back to the couch. She sobbed in my arms, great gasping sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her soul. "I loved him, Mom. I really loved him. How could I be so stupid?" My own tears started falling then, mixing with hers. "You weren't stupid, baby. You were trusting. You saw the best in him because that's who you are. He's the one who's broken, not you." We stayed like that until the sobs slowed down and Sarah pulled away, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Her makeup was completely destroyed, mascara running down her cheeks, but she looked stronger somehow, more herself. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "There are people waiting. The ceremony is supposed to start in 20 minutes. I looked at my daughter, this strong, beautiful woman who'd just had her heart shattered and felt fierce pride. "We cancel it," I said firmly. "I'll have Robert make an announcement. We'll say you're ill, we'll handle the guests and vendors, we'll deal with everything. You don't have to face anyone if you don't want to." Sarah nodded slowly, then looked down at her wedding dress. "Help me get out of this," she said quietly. "I never want to see it again." As I helped her unzip the gown, I saw her face in the mirror. The girl who'd put on that dress 2 hours ago was gone. The woman looking back at me now was different, harder, but somehow more real. We got Sarah changed into jeans and a sweater, packed up her things, and prepared to leave through the back entrance. Robert had already started damage control, telling guests there was a medical emergency, and the wedding was postponed. We paid the hotel extra to keep things quiet and handle the aftermath. Money talks, and right then, I was grateful we had it to spend. But as we headed for the exit, I had a sinking feeling that Marcus wasn't going to let this go quietly. The next morning, I woke up to my phone exploding with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media alerts, all coming in faster than I could read them. My hands shook as I opened the first few messages. They were horrible, accusatory, filled with venom. "How could you do that to him? You're a controlling monster. That poor man dodged a bullet with your psycho family." What was happening? I stumbled out of bed and opened my laptop. Marcus had posted a long statement on every social media platform he had. According to his version of events, he was the victim of a cruel setup by a controlling, manipulative mother-in-law who couldn't stand to lose her grip on her daughter. He claimed I'd kept Sarah isolated her whole life, using the business to maintain control. He painted himself as a man who'd finally given Sarah the courage to be independent, only to have her evil mother sabotage everything at the last minute, and people were believing him. Worse than the post itself was what he'd done with the recording. He'd edited it, cutting and rearranging pieces to make it sound like he was defending himself against accusations from his groomsmen. The way he'd spliced it together, it seemed like they were the ones making cruel jokes and he was trying to shut them down. It was masterful manipulation, and it was working. The comments were brutal. Hundreds of people calling me names, saying I'd ruined my daughter's life, demanding that Sarah escape my toxic influence. "Mom?" Sarah appeared in my doorway, her phone in her hand, her face pale. "Are you seeing this? He's destroying us. Everyone thinks we're the bad guys." I pulled her into a hug, my mind racing. This was worse than I'd imagined. Marcus wasn't just angry, he was waging a public relations war. And he was winning. Our phones kept ringing. Some were concerned friends, but others were angry acquaintances who believed Marcus's lies. The catering business phone was lighting up too, and not in a good way. By noon, 3 major clients had called to cancel their contracts. They didn't want to be associated with the scandal. 2 of our best employees quit via text message, saying they couldn't work for someone who would do what Marcus claimed I'd done. Even worse, people had started gathering outside our catering kitchen, protesters with signs calling us abusers and manipulators. Marcus had weaponized the internet against us, and we were watching everything we'd built start to crumble in real time. "We have to respond," Sarah said, pacing our living room like a caged animal. "We have to tell people the truth." But I knew better. If we respond now, we'll just look defensive. He's controlling the narrative, and anything we say will be twisted. Robert arrived an hour later with Patricia Chen, our lawyer. Both of them looked grim. "This is bad," Patricia said, spreading printouts of Marcus's posts across our dining table. "He's not just attacking you personally, he's going after your credibility as business owners." "Can we sue him?" I asked, feeling helpless. Patricia nodded slowly. "For defamation, absolutely. But litigation takes time. And meanwhile, your reputation is being destroyed daily." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We need to be strategic. We need to prove he's lying, not just claim it." That's when Robert had an idea. "What if we have the recording analyzed by an audio expert? They can prove it's been edited, show exactly how Marcus manipulated it to change the context." We spent the next 3 days in damage control mode. Patricia hired a forensic audio specialist who confirmed what we knew. Marcus's version was heavily edited, with cuts and splices designed to reverse the meaning. We documented everything, prepared a counteroffensive, but before we could launch it, Marcus struck again. He appeared on a popular local podcast, crying as he talked about how he'd been deceived by a family he'd tried to love. The host was sympathetic. The audience was outraged, and our business lost 5 more clients overnight. Sarah stopped eating, stopped sleeping. I'd find her at 3 in the morning, scrolling through hateful comments, tears streaming down her face. "They're calling me weak," she whispered one night. "They're saying you've brainwashed me, that I'm just your puppet. It broke my heart to see her like this. But I also saw something else growing in her. Anger. Determination. The kind of steel that gets forged in fire. My daughter was changing, and Marcus had no idea what was coming for him. On the 10th day after the canceled wedding, things got even worse. Marcus filed a lawsuit against us, claiming emotional distress, defamation, and breach of contract. Breach of contract? I shouted, reading the papers Robert brought over. What contract? According to Marcus's lawyer, there had been a verbal agreement to make him a partner in Sweet Dreams Catering after the wedding. He claimed I'd deliberately sabotaged the marriage to avoid fulfilling that agreement. It was absolutely insane, but it was also dangerous. He hired Damian Cross, Patricia said quietly, and I felt my stomach drop. Damian Cross was the most aggressive, ruthless lawyer in Charleston. He didn't just win cases, he destroyed opponents. He'd turned simple disputes into media circuses that ended careers and bankrupted families. This isn't about winning in court, Patricia continued. This is about bleeding you dry, destroying your reputation so thoroughly that even if you win legally, you lose everything that matters. Your business, your standing in the community, everything. That night, Sarah and I sat on our back porch, watching the sun set over the marsh. Everything felt surreal, like we'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. I can't believe I almost married him, Sarah said softly. I can't believe I didn't see who he really was. I took her hand. He's a professional, honey. This isn't the first time he's done this. Men like Marcus, they study people. They find vulnerabilities and exploit them. You didn't fail, he did. He's the broken one. We're going to lose everything, aren't we? She asked. And I heard the fear in her voice. I wanted to reassure her, to promise everything would be okay. But I couldn't lie. Maybe, I admitted. But we'll survive it. We started with nothing before. We can do it again. Sarah looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw my fighter coming back. No, she said firmly. We're not losing anything. He wants to play dirty? Fine. Let's show him what real fighters look like. The next morning, we met with Patricia and Robert to plan our counterattack. But we needed something Marcus didn't expect, something that would expose him completely. That's when Robert mentioned something interesting. I've been digging into Marcus's background, he said, pulling out a file. His family's construction company didn't just have financial problems. There were lawsuits, allegations of fraud, investors claiming Marcus and his father deliberately tanked projects to collect insurance money. Nothing was ever proven, but there's a pattern. Can we use that? Sarah asked, leaning forward. Patricia shook her head. Not directly, but it shows character. It shows a history of deception and manipulation for financial gain. She paused, tapping her pen against her notepad. What we really need is proof that he's done this before. Other women, other schemes. If we can show a pattern of behavior, we can completely destroy his credibility. That seemed impossible. Where would we even start? But sometimes, the universe has a way of answering prayers you didn't know you'd said. That afternoon, a woman named Jennifer Holloway contacted us through our business email. She'd seen the news about Marcus and had a story to tell. We met her at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town, where she told us something that made my blood run cold. Marcus and I dated 5 years ago, Jennifer said, stirring her coffee with shaking hands. We met at a charity gala, and he swept me off my feet. 6 months later, we were engaged. He was so charming, so attentive, everything I'd ever wanted. What happened? Sarah asked gently, and I could see she already knew the answer would be bad. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. 3 weeks before our wedding, my business partner overheard Marcus on the phone. He was talking to someone about how he'd gain access to my family's pharmaceutical distribution company once we were married, how he planned to leverage our connections to save his father's failing business. My heart clenched. It was exactly the same playbook. I confronted him, and he denied everything at first. Then he got angry, cruel, called me names I won't repeat, said I was lucky he'd even considered marrying someone like me. Jennifer wiped her eyes. But I didn't have proof, just my partner's word. Marcus turned everyone against me, said I was having cold feet and making up stories to justify backing out. I lost friends, business contacts, my reputation. It took me 3 years to recover. The pain in her voice was raw, real, and familiar. Why didn't you come forward when you heard about Sarah? I asked, trying to keep judgment out of my voice. Jennifer looked down at her hands. Because I was terrified. Marcus threatened me after our breakup, said if I ever talked about what happened, he'd destroy me completely. He has connections, money, lawyers. I was just starting to rebuild my life. I couldn't risk losing everything again. Then she looked up at Sarah with fierce determination. But when I saw what he was doing to you, I couldn't stay silent anymore. We asked if she'd be willing to go on record, to testify if needed. Jennifer hesitated, the fear clear in her eyes, but finally nodded. Yes. If it helps stop him from doing this to someone else, yes. Patricia immediately started documenting everything, getting Jennifer's story officially recorded and notarized. But Jennifer had something else to share. I'm not the only one, she said quietly. There was another woman, Amanda something. She dated Marcus about 7 years ago. I heard through mutual friends that something similar happened to her. Finding Amanda took 2 days of detective work, but Robert tracked her down in Savannah. She was initially reluctant to talk, scared of Marcus's reach, but when we told her about Jennifer and Sarah, she agreed to meet. Amanda's story was almost identical to Jennifer's. Marcus had targeted her for her family's real estate portfolio, gotten engaged, planned to take control of everything, and then vanished when her father got suspicious and investigated his background. He told me I was lucky he'd wasted his time on someone as plain as me, Amanda said, her voice hollow. 3 women, 3 nearly identical stories spanning 7 years. Marcus wasn't just a con artist. He was a serial predator who targeted successful women, manipulated them emotionally, and planned to steal their assets. The pattern was undeniable, and now we had proof. Patricia prepared a comprehensive legal filing that included all 3 testimonies, the unedited audio recording, and the expert analysis showing how Marcus had doctored his version. But she recommended something else, too. We need to go public, she said. If we release this information strategically, we control the narrative instead of reacting to his. But it's risky, Patricia warned. Marcus will fight back hard. He'll claim these women are lying, that we paid them off, whatever he can think of. It's going to get ugly before it gets better. Sarah and I looked at each other. We'd been through hell already, but this would be willingly walking into the fire. Do it, Sarah said, her voice strong. I'm done hiding. I'm done letting him control the story. We held a press conference 3 days later. Patricia stood at the podium with Sarah, me, Jennifer, and Amanda beside her. She laid out everything. The original recording, the expert analysis showing Marcus's version was edited, and the testimonies of 3 women he'd targeted over 7 years. The media attention was immediate and overwhelming. Every local news station picked it up, and by evening, it had gone regional. The public response shifted almost overnight. People who'd attacked us were suddenly apologizing, expressing shock at Marcus's pattern of behavior. But Marcus didn't go down quietly. That same evening, he released a statement through Damian Cross, his lawyer, claiming all 3 women were either paid actors or former partners with axes to grind. He alleged I'd orchestrated the entire thing, using my business connections to find women willing to lie for money. Some people believed him. Conspiracy theories started spreading online, but the tide had turned. More people were questioning his credibility than ours, and that made all the difference. 2 days after our press conference, something unexpected happened. Marcus's own cousin, Tyler Ashford, reached out to Patricia. Tyler had seen the news and wanted to talk. We met him at Patricia's office, unsure what to expect. Tyler looked nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder like he thought Marcus might appear any second. I've known Marcus my whole life, he started, his voice quiet. I've watched him manipulate people since we were kids. He's always been like this, always calculating, always looking for the angle. Why are you telling us this? Sarah asked, understandably skeptical. Tyler met her eyes. Because what he's doing to you is wrong, and because I have proof that'll bury him. He pulled out his phone and showed us a series of text messages. They were between Marcus and Tyler from 6 months earlier, right after Marcus had proposed to Sarah. In them, Marcus explicitly laid out his plan to marry Sarah, gain control of Sweet Dreams Catering, sell it off within a year, and walk away with the profits. He sent you this? I asked, stunned. Why would he tell you? Tyler laughed bitterly. Because he thought I'd admire it. He wanted to brag about how clever he was being. Marcus sees people as either marks or accomplices. He thought I was the latter. But Tyler had kept the messages, disgusted by his cousin's behavior, but too scared of family repercussions to act. Until now. I can't watch him destroy more lives. My wife convinced me to come forward. She said staying silent makes me complicit. Patricia immediately secured the text messages, having them authenticated and added to our case file. This was the smoking gun we needed. Not just women claiming Marcus had targeted them, but his own written confession of intent to defraud. With this evidence, his lawsuit against us became a joke, and our countersuit for defamation and harassment became ironclad. He's done, Patricia said with grim satisfaction. No jury will side with him now, and no amount of spin from Damian Cross can explain away his own words. The next week felt like watching dominoes fall. Two of Marcus's business partners, seeing the evidence mounting against him, publicly severed ties with him. 3 companies that had been considering investments in his ventures pulled out, citing ethical concerns. The construction company his father owned, already struggling, took another hit as clients worried about being associated with the family. Marcus's carefully constructed image was crumbling, and everyone could see the rot underneath. But Marcus wasn't done fighting. In a move that shocked everyone, he filed for bankruptcy, claiming the legal battles and loss of business relationships had left him financially ruined. It was clearly a strategic move, trying to garner sympathy and avoid paying damages when we inevitably won our lawsuit. Damian Cross released statements about how a good man had been destroyed by vindictive women and their coordinated attack. Some people bought it, but most didn't. The evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too clear. The trial, when it finally happened, was anticlimactic. Marcus's lawyers tried every trick they could think of. They questioned Jennifer and Amanda's credibility, suggested Tyler was lying for inheritance reasons, even tried to claim the text messages were fabricated. But Patricia had done her homework. Every piece of evidence was authenticated, every witness was credible, every legal argument was airtight. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a verdict in our favor on all counts. Marcus was ordered to pay us $350,000 in damages, publicly retract all defamatory statements, and was barred from contacting Sarah or me directly or indirectly. The judge was particularly harsh, noting that Marcus's pattern of predatory behavior targeting successful women represents a disturbing abuse of trust. It was everything we'd hoped for, but somehow it felt empty. Yes, we'd won, but the cost had been enormous. Our business had lost 40% of its clients. We'd spent a fortune on legal fees, and the emotional toll was incalculable. Sarah and I sat in Patricia's office after the verdict, neither of us quite able to process that it was over. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked gently. Sarah thought about it for a long moment. Relieved, exhausted, and honestly, still a little broken. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "He made me doubt everything, Mom. My judgment, my worth, whether I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. The verdict doesn't fix that." My heart ached for her, but I also saw the strength in her eyes. "You're not broken, baby," I said firmly. "You're healing. There's a difference." Over the next 6 months, we focused on rebuilding. We offered special promotions to win back clients, hired new staff to replace those we'd lost, and slowly, Sweet Dreams Catering started thriving again. But more importantly, Sarah started thriving. She threw herself into the business with new passion, creating innovative dessert lines that became bestsellers. She started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma, and gradually, I watched my daughter rediscover her smile. As for Marcus, we heard through the grapevine that he'd left Charleston, relocating to somewhere out west. His father's construction company had filed for bankruptcy, his reputation was in tatters, and he'd burned through what remained of his family's money on legal fees. I didn't feel triumphant hearing that, just sad. Sad that someone could be so broken inside that they'd spend their whole life hurting others, and sad for all the women who came before us and might have been too scared to speak up. 1 year after the wedding that never happened, Sarah and I hosted a small celebration at our catering kitchen. We invited Jennifer, Amanda, Tyler, Robert, Patricia, and a handful of close friends who'd stood by us through everything. It wasn't about celebrating Marcus's downfall. It was about celebrating survival, resilience, and the kind of strength that comes from facing your worst nightmare and refusing to let it define you. Sarah gave a toast that night that brought tears to my eyes. "A year ago, I thought my life was over," she said, raising her glass. "I thought I'd lost my chance at happiness, lost my ability to trust, lost everything that mattered. But standing here now, I realize I didn't lose anything that was real. I lost an illusion, a lie disguised as love, and in its place, I found something so much more valuable. I found my own strength. I found true friends. I found out what real love looks like, the kind my mom showed me by protecting me even when it meant breaking my heart." The business not only recovered but grew. We expanded into 2 new locations, hired 20 new employees, and our revenue doubled. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching Sarah laugh again, really laugh, without that shadow in her eyes. It was knowing that we'd stood up to someone who thought he could destroy us and proved him wrong. It was the letters we received from other women who'd found the courage to leave bad relationships after hearing our story. That's what mattered. As for me, I learned that sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is hurting them to save them. Standing in that hallway 10 minutes before Sarah's wedding, hearing Marcus's true feelings, was one of the worst moments of my life. But I'd do it again in a heartbeat, because that's what mothers do. We stand in the fire so our children don't have to. We make the impossible choices, bear the unbearable weights, and somehow find the strength to keep standing when everything in us wants to fall. Sarah eventually did find love again, a kind, genuine man named David, who worked as a veterinarian and thought she hung the moon. When she told me they were dating, I'll admit I was scared. Scared for her, scared she'd been too damaged to ever fully trust again. But then I met David, and I saw the way he looked at her. Not at her business, not at what she could give him, just at her. The real her. And I knew she'd be okay. The day Sarah and David got married, 2 years after that nightmare with Marcus, was everything her first wedding was supposed to be. Simple, joyful, filled with people who genuinely loved them both. As I watched my daughter walk down the aisle, radiant and confident and whole again, I thought about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best ones. If Marcus hadn't shown his true colors when he did, Sarah might have spent years trapped in a miserable marriage, slowly losing herself piece by piece. I stood there as mother of the bride for the second time, but this time everything felt different. There was no knot in my stomach, no nagging voice in the back of my head warning me something was wrong. Just peace. Pure, beautiful peace. When David said his vows, his voice cracked with emotion as he promised to love Sarah exactly as she was, to support her dreams, to be her partner in every sense of the word. And I believed him. More importantly, Sarah believed him too. At the reception, Sarah pulled me aside while everyone was dancing. "Mom, I need to tell you something," she said, squeezing my hand. "Thank you for saving me that day. I know I was angry at first. I know I blamed you for ruining everything. But you didn't ruin anything. You saved me from ruining my entire life." Tears rolled down both our faces as we hugged. "I would do it 1,000 times over," I whispered. "That's what love looks like, baby. Real love protects, even when it hurts." As for Marcus, we heard through the grapevine that he'd left Charleston, relocating to somewhere out west. His father's construction company had filed for bankruptcy, his reputation was in tatters, and he'd burned through what remained of his family's money on legal fees. I didn't feel triumphant hearing that, just sad. Sad that someone could be so broken inside that they'd spend their whole life hurting others, and sad for all the women who came before us and might have been too scared to speak up. But mostly I felt grateful. Grateful that Sarah escaped before it was too late. Now, whenever someone asks me about that day, about the wedding I stopped 10 minutes before it started, I tell them the same thing. Trust your instincts, protect the people you love, and never be afraid to be the villain in someone else's story if it means being the hero in your own. Marcus tried to make me the bad guy, the controlling mother who ruined everything. But I sleep peacefully at night knowing I saved my daughter from a nightmare, and I'd do it again without hesitation. The business not only survived, it thrived. We expanded into 2 new locations, hired 20 new employees, and our revenue doubled. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching Sarah laugh again, really laugh, without that shadow in her eyes. It was knowing that we'd stood up to someone who thought he could destroy us and proved him wrong. It was the letters we received from other women who'd found the courage to leave bad relationships after hearing our story. That's what mattered. That's what made every painful moment worth it. Standing in that hallway 10 minutes before Sarah's wedding, hearing Marcus's true feelings was one of the worst moments of my life, but it was also the moment that saved her future. Sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is hurting them to save them. Sometimes being a good mother means being willing to break your child's heart today so it doesn't get destroyed tomorrow. We stand in the fire so our children don't have to. We make the impossible choices, bear the unbearable weights, and somehow find the strength to keep standing when everything in us wants to fall. So if you've made it this far, thank you for listening to our story. If you've ever been manipulated, gaslit, or made to feel like you were crazy for trusting your instincts, please know you're not alone. Your gut feelings exist for a reason, and sometimes the people who call you paranoid or controlling are exactly the ones you need to be protecting yourself from. Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice to protect someone you love? Has anyone ever tried to manipulate you the way Marcus manipulated Sarah? Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, someone who might be doubting their instincts right now, someone who needs permission to trust what they feel. And make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we're just getting started. There are more stories to tell, more truths to share, more voices that need to be heard. Until next time, remember that protecting the people you love is never wrong. even when it feels impossible.